Uranus is located in our solar system, which is in the Milky Way galaxy. Uranus is the seventh planet from the Sun. It's a rocky ice planet with rings. It looks like a big light blue ball because it has methane ice, and methane ice is in a blue color. Uranus is half the size of Saturn and about the same size as Neptune. Uranus also has very similar composition to Neptune, with a diameter of 51,000 kilometers. It has 13 layers of rings, but you can't see them without a telescope. On a clear night sky at the right time of year, you can see Uranus in the sky. If you look at it with a telescope, it'll be much easier to see all the little details. Uranus is classified as a gas giant, but has a different chemical composition to the larger gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn. Uranus also has about 15 moons as far as we know of. Uranus is a very cold planet. At minimum temperature, it could reach about negative 224 Celsius. Uranus's atmosphere is mostly made out of hydrogen and helium. Uranus is the only planet whose name is derived from Greek mythology instead of Roman mythology, like all the other planets. It takes Uranus about 84 years for it to make its orbit around the Sun. Astronomers think that Uranus smashed into something big while it's forming, causing it to tilt on its side. One pole of Uranus is always facing the Sun, while the other is facing away. The one side of Uranus facing the Sun has no night, and the other side has no day. The middle of Uranus has a short life cycle of day and night. Uranus was discovered by William Herschel on March 13, 1781. Back then, people thought there were only 6 planets in our solar system. On a clear night sky, William was looking through his telescope and thought he saw a comet. William announced it to the whole town. Then a Russian astronomer named Anderson John Lexell proved that it was not a comet, it was a planet. He told the townspeople of his findings. He said it was too round to be a comet and that it had no orbit. Because William discovered it, he got to name it. He wanted to name the planet something like George or King George III, but then he chose his last name, Herschel, in honor of his discovery. Britain did not like the name Herschel because they wanted to name the planet Neptune or even Neptune Great Britain. Then an astronomer named Bode decided to name the planet Uranus, the Latin way of saying Greek god of the sky. The people liked the idea, but some of them thought it should be named something like uranium. They voted on which they would like better. After a little while, they chose to name the planet Uranus. Some of the moons of Uranus are named after characters in Shakespeare's plays. In 1986, NASA's Voyager 2 interplanetary probe encountered Uranus. This flyby remains the only investigator of the planet carried out from short distance, and no other visits are currently planned. Launched in 1997, Voyager 2 made its closest approach to Uranus on January 24, 1986, coming within 81,500 kilometers of Uranus's cloud tops before continuing on its journey to Neptune. Voyager 2 studied the structure and chemical composition of Uranus's atmosphere and its unique weather caused by its ax tilt of 97.77 degrees. Uranus has a density of 1.27. Its gravity was affected while it was forming. Uranus was hit by a large meteor or even a small planet while it's forming. This caused it to tilt on its axis. Now Uranus is tilted. Some scientists think that 2 of Uranus' moons will smash into each other someday. This could be bad because it might hurt Uranus or damage it somehow, or it might add on to its rings. Uranus is bigger than most planets such as Mars, Mercury, Earth, Venus, and about the same size as Neptune. Uranus has the 3rd largest radius and 4th largest mass of any planet in our solar system. I chose Uranus because I like how it's tilted on its side because no other planet is like this, and I like choosing planets that are different. Also, I like cold weather better than hot, and Uranus is really cold. And my favorite color is blue, just like Uranus. And because it's tilted on one side of Uranus is always facing the Sun while the other side is facing the night. In the middle, there is a short life cycle of day and night, and I thought this was pretty cool. That's why I chose Uranus. I like the rings of Uranus because they remind me of a tornado in the sky, because tornadoes have lots of layers of wind and dust, just like Uranus's rings. A tornado picks up things in the sky like sheds, trees, plants, and sometimes people. It Uranus rings pick up meteors in space. It specifically reminds me of a tornado that I saw on the news that picked up a school. This reminds me of the two moons of Uranus named Cupid and Titania that are going to smash into each other because they are really big, just like the school. That's why the rings of Uranus remind me of. I like the atmosphere of Uranus because they remind me of a foggy swamp. A swamp normally has thick air, just like Uranus's atmosphere, and the fog is like the thin clouds of Uranus's atmosphere. This reminds me of a great book I read called Wild. It was about this guy who travels to different places and he goes to a swamp at one point. Then he gets lost in the fog, but at the end he finds his way out. This also reminds me of a time that I visited the swamp. I saw tons of frogs jumping on the lily pads. The swamp reminds me of Uranus's atmosphere because you might get lost in an atmosphere of Uranus somehow. This whole planet reminds me of a foggy swamp. The weather on Uranus reminds me of Russia because it's really cold in Russia, but not as cold as on Uranus. This reminds me because Russia is really cold, and when I went there was snow up to 7 feet high. At the very end, the snow melted and formed huge puddles. On Uranus, there's a lot of ice and water. That's why Russia reminds me of Uranus. And also because on the very top of Uranus, it's really cold. Just like Russia is more colder than other countries because it is more on the top of the world and it's colder there. The tilted trees remind me of Uranus because the trees are tilted and so is Uranus. Also because the tree's bark is like Uranus's texture. But when you look far away at Uranus or a tilted tree, they both look smooth. At the top of a tree has a long green leaf, just like Uranus has a lot of ice, and the yellow leaves are like the rocks. The parking lot reminds me of Uranus's surface because Uranus's surface is rocky and full of ice, and the tiny rocks remind me of Uranus, of the rocks on Uranus. There's a lot of dust when you kick up the parking lot rocks, just like there's a lot of gas on Uranus. The dust is like its atmosphere, and you can slip on the rocks just like you can slip on the ice on Uranus. I learned that Uranus has water on it, then I thought it had ice on it instead of water. I also learned that the thing that gives Uranus its blue color is methane ice. I didn't know that what gave Uranus its color at first. Then also I learned that Uranus is tilted. It is the only planet that has a tilt on Uranus. Uranus is special.